Hello, welcome to another episode of Jim's Allotment Garden. Today is Tuesday the 30th of September, so this will be the last September tour, if you like. I'm not going to do a tour as such today because I only did one yesterday, so there's not a lot of change. But what I want to do in this video is show you all the bits that I couldn't fit into the last one because it was already half an hour long. So here's all the bits that should have been in the last one, but it made it into this one. So welcome to another episode of Jim's Allotment Garden. So the sunflowers, as soon as they've started to die off, or sort of go down anyway, you can see that the petals have started to, you know, sort of wither away a little bit, and if you pull at them, they'll come out. So basically, this is a good sign to say that it's ready to take down. So to save the seed, what you want to do is the seeds and the whole head of the sunflower will go rotten very easily. It gets like a sort of mildew all over it, and then it'll send the seeds bad. So what I suggest you do is, whilst it's nice and dry like it is at the moment, you want to cut just above with a pair of secateurs sort of there, I don't know, leaving probably 3 or 4 inches of the stem on, and then take them in the greenhouse so you can get all the seeds out before it gets to you know, before it rains and sort of gets them wet. So we'll do that now. So now you've cut the sunflower off, just discard the leaves, and you can actually see how vast this thing actually is. I mean, if that's the size of my hand, they are quite scary. It looks like in miniature when you've got it like that. But basically, the first thing you need to do is to get rid of all of these sort of little petal bits like that. Now, the easiest way to do this, obviously when you've got 2 hands and you're not recording like I am at the moment, it's quite easy, but you can see the seeds underneath there. So all you need to do is with your hand, and I'll warn you now, there's a lot of sap and sort of sticky stuff that comes out of this when you're doing this, so you'll get it all over your hands, and it's quite difficult to get off, so you'll need plenty of sort of washing up liquid to scrub it off your hands after. But there's only one way to do it, and I don't think you'll get away with wearing gloves doing this. So basically what you need to do is get your hand and just rub all over the petals lightly. And these are the individual sort of actual little flowers. I think a sunflower is actually multiple flowers. So I think there's millions of little flowers within one big structure. So just by rubbing your hand over the flower like that, you'll easily remove all of the sort of the little flowers and or petals, whatever you want to call them, over the top. And then what you actually end up with is the seeds. So those are the seeds, and it looks just like a sort of honeycomb type effect. Now, what you need to do is get the seeds out of here. So as soon as you've got all of the buds off, then you're ready to get the seeds out. So what I'll do is I'll just empty, which basically you need a nice big tub like this to do this. What you can do is try to dry it like that inside the greenhouse for a bit, but to be honest with you, I found that the best results are by if you leave it to dry like this. What you can get is fungus sort of growing around the edge, and if you turn it over, if you imagine this part here is quite thick, it's about 3 or 4 inches thick, and there's a lot of moisture in there, which then causes all of this lot on this side to go sort of mildewing and you know, with mould on it. So if I was you, the best thing to do is to get the seeds out whilst it's like this. So by holding the flower at the back with your hand like that, what you need to do is with your thumb rub backwards and forwards like that, and you'll find that the
the seeds will start to release. Now they tend to be the easiest round the edge like this, so if you start at the edge, going backwards and forwards with your thumb, you need to be reasonably sort of harsh with it. You'll find that the seeds will start to come away from the main flower, and as I say, you need a reasonable sized tub, or if you haven't got a tub, use a bucket, or the other thing you could possibly do is put like a sheet of cloth on the floor just to collect the seeds, because they do tend to go everywhere when you're doing this. And then just work your way around. And what I find is the further you go up, if you sort of go against the lines, obviously the lines are sort of going like that. If you go against the lines like that, they'll start to fall out, and you need to be reasonably patient with it, because it can take you quite a while to get round and to do each one. I mean, it might take you sort of a flower this size might take you sort of 3 or 4 minutes, if not more, to go around. Then the further you go to the centre, the closer you go to the centre, the smaller the seeds will be, and the harder they are to sort of get out. So you just need to be quite rough with it, like that, and just flick them out as you go along. So as you can see, in that last minute, I've got probably about 1/3 of them off already, so it's not too bad. And what you end up with is, if I just put the flower down, what you end up with is the seeds like that. So they're quite nice, sort of big seeds, and these are the seeds. I'll save some of these seeds for next year's plants. And then after a day or so drying, they'll turn to this. So they'll dry out quite quickly, and they'll go this sort of grey colour. Not all of them do that. Some of them have like a black line up the middle of them. It depends on the flower, because they do vary quite a lot. Even if you've got the same seed, between the flowers you'll find that they do vary quite a bit. But as soon as you've got them all out of the flower like this, what you need to do is just make sure you've got none of these green sort of petals and bits and bobs like that in there. So you've just go through, to spend a couple of minutes going through, making sure you've got all of the bits of green out, and anything that could hold moisture, which is going to send them bad, because they will easily start to go off if you and then as soon as you've done that, you can put the seeds in a tray like this. Now what I suggest you do is sprinkle them around a tray like that. You don't want them much thicker than that. There's literally just a sort of pudding like that, and then leave them in the greenhouse where it's drying in the sun, and then the seeds will dry out. This is exactly the same as doing the other seeds that I've shown you before, but obviously there's a lot more of them. And what I do is I normally save 100 or so seeds. So I'll probably save about half that many seeds, something like that, for flowers next year. And then all of the rest I'll feed to the chickens. Now, you can eat them yourself. You can put them in like nut roasts, or you can sort of put them, or just eat them as they are, to be honest with you. Obviously you need to take the outer shell off, so what you're eating is like the kernel part inside. But as soon as they've dried out, you can feed them to your chickens over winter, which is really good for the chickens. It's a good source of protein and fats for the chicken, so that'll be good for them for the winter. And or as I say, you can use it for yourself, but I tend to keep them for the chickens so that they can have something over the winter which is nice and healthy and obviously organically grown, and that'll keep them going through the winter months when the pickings are scarce within the rest of the garden. Whilst your seeds are drying in the tray, what I'd advise you do is, on a reasonably regular basis, every few days, just come up and just check that there's no sort of mould forming or anything like that in the seeds. Make sure they're dry, and just sort of move them about in the tray so that you get both sides exposed to the light, so they dry out evenly. If there's anything that looks kind of suspect in there, obviously there's nothing in there at the moment, but if there's anything in there that looks like it's possibly turning mouldy or anything like that, then remove that and anything that's surrounding it, and just discard that. Otherwise, if you do get any sort of fungus or anything growing in there, it will very quickly spread across the whole tray, and send them all bad. So if there's anything that you do find, like that for example there, that's got a bit of something on the end of it. I think that'll be all right, but you can see that. That would possibly be one I'd discard for fear of it sort of going off. So what I wanted to explain to you in this part of the video is how I'm planning the allotment for next year. Now, when you're planning out an allotment, the main thing you need to start with is the ground. What is the ground like, and what type of crops you're going to put in there. Now, in my allotment, the bottom half, which is the area where the rhubarb is and down towards the road, and probably about 6 foot coming this way, that tends to get quite waterlogged down there. So the ground is most certainly the wettest ground, and it doesn't drain particularly well, which is why I've put the drainage system in. Now, crops that'll do well down there, obviously the rhubarb does well down there, but I need to be putting things like the gourds, so things like pumpkins, squashes, sort of anything of that type of plant down there will grow well. Also, other water-loving plants will be things like beans, peas, things like that. That'll always grow well down there. Now, in years gone by, I have put other crops down there. I've put onions down there, and I've put potatoes down there, and neither of them have done very well. In fact, when I put the onions down there, it actually killed all the onions off. So, a lot of this is sort of comes from experience. And if you're first starting out in an allotment, basically you need to sort of work out how the allotment is over the first couple of years. Obviously, because I've been doing this allotment for some years now, I know what the ground is like, and I know what grows well where. So basically, I always grow about 10 rows of potatoes, and I know the potatoes won't grow well down the bottom end. Now, 10 rows of potatoes takes up around 25 feet of the length of the allotment. So because I've got this greenhouse, and I've got the carrot beds, the strawberries, the asparagus, and then the raspberries up this far end, which is all the perennial plants. So these plants are in here long term. Basically, I've got 3/4 of the allotment left to grow the sort of annual vegetables, etc. So really, I've only got half, because the bottom half is waterlogged, or can be, and this top half is filled with perennial plants. I've only got the middle, the sort of the half in the middle of it to grow potatoes. So when you're rotating crops round, ideally what you want to do is rotate them on a 4-year basis, so you don't grow anything in the same place, sort of more often than every 4th year. However, because I grow so many potatoes, and because I can only use half of the allotment to grow them vegetables successfully, I have to basically alternate the potatoes. So every 2nd year I'll grow the potatoes in the same place. The way I get around this is, obviously I put a lot of nutrition into the ground. I put a lot of chicken manure, well rotted sort of compost, etc. into the ground, and then that kind of enables me to grow the same thing there. It's not ideal, but I know that I can't grow potatoes down the bottom end, so I don't try. The onions, the brassicas and everything else can be rotated a lot more than that, but because the potatoes take up so much room, they take 1/4 of the allotment, and I know I'm limited to where I can actually grow them. Really, I've only got that much room to grow them. So this is I'm not the kind of person who will draw things out on a piece of paper to sort of plot it out. I normally plot it out in my head, to be honest with you. But here's an image of what the allotment looks like from kind of a bird's eye view. Obviously, in the top, I've got all of the perennial, the sort of the greenhouse. So starting from that end, so this will be at the top of the drawing that you'll see in a moment. And then I've got the herb borders. Then I've got the strawberries, the greenhouse, and the carrot bed. Then I've got the asparagus bed, which is directly in front of me at the moment. And then I've got the 2 rows of raspberries, and then obviously I've got clear ground where I can grow all the annual stuff. And then at the bottom you'll see where the rhubarb is. And this allotment plot is 100 feet long, and it's 26 feet wide. So basically, if you look at the smaller, the sort of the squares in the image, that's each one of those represents 1 foot square. So as you can see from that image, the sort of the top quarter of the allotment is used up by all, you know, everything where I'm standing now, the greenhouse, etc. So the potatoes will sort of rotate backwards and forwards between the sort of the second quarter and the third quarter, and then sort of backwards and forwards. And then the onions will typically be somewhere near the potatoes, but the onions will, because the onions take up about half, if not less than half of what the potatoes do. Basically the onions can move sort of backwards and forwards, so I can rotate them a lot better. So when I'm first planning out the allotment, obviously what is perennial is fixed. So I've got to play with basically what was the white area in that diagram. The first thing I place is the potatoes for every year. So, and the way I do that is obviously look at what was in 2012, then look at what was in 2013 last year, and then obviously what was in this year, 2014, and then next year I'll be putting the potatoes where they weren't basically this year. If you can rotate them round more than I am, obviously that's better. But so this is an image of what the allotment looked like last year when the tunnels were down either side of the rhubarb, and then I had the potatoes up at this top end, and then between the potatoes and the tunnels I had the onions and the rest of the greens, etc. So this is an image of what that looked like. And just to help you sort of visualise what that looked like, I'm now going to show you a few photographs. You'll be familiar with these photographs, it's what's at the start and the end of the videos. But this is what the allotment looked like last year when the tunnels were down the bottom, and I've taken pictures from various angles so you can see how it was laid out. So this year, sort of moving down the allotment, the first section was where the onions were, and then straight after that I've got the two tunnels. Now the two tunnels obviously contain the brassicas, so I've got in there I've got the kale, the spinach beet, the broccoli. Then straight after that I'd got the gourds, so I'd got the cucumbers, the pumpkins, etc. And then straight the sort of the next quarter then, shown in yellow on the diagram, was the potatoes. And then from the potatoes down to the rhubarb, I then filled that up with the other sort of greens and bits and bobs. So I've got the parsnips, I've got the beetroot, etc. And then after the beetroot, I then filled it up with the rest of the stuff like the beans and etc. So this is a sort of bird's eye view of as the allotment looked this year. And again, just to help you visualise that in the the sort of the real world, I've taken some photographs from each corner of the allotment. So this is what the allotment looked like this year whilst it was all growing. So next year, the potatoes are obviously going to move up, like I've just explained in the previous little bit. So where the two tunnels are now and where the onions were this year, that's where the potatoes are going to go. So that's my starting point. Then after that, will go all of the vegetables that I can't grow in the damp part at the bottom. So there'll go the onions and the brassicas, etc. Obviously the brassicas will be in the tunnel, but the sort of the parsnips, the Swedes, which won't be in the tunnel potentially, will go there, and then and the onions, and then after that down the bottom end where the beans have been this year, and where the kohlrabi is, and etc. I'm going to grow all of the gourds and the pumpkins and the squashes, etc. And the winterfest gourds, etc. So this is what that'll look like next year.
So, just to reiterate what I've just said, this bottom off, so from this road up to sort of past the rhubarb, and kind of about 6 foot after the rhubarb, so basically where these parsnips end here. That quarter of the allotment is where it always gets waterlogged, and the soil is not too bad. The soil's reasonably consistent all the way up the allotment, to be honest with you. But this bit here, underneath the ground, is clay, which is why it gets waterlogged. The top half of the allotment is sitting on sandstone, so that's why it drains quite well. The soil down here is particularly good. In fact, the soil that's in this bottom section is possibly the best soil that I've got. This soil, this side of the rhubarb here, is probably the poorest soil, and most certainly over there where that bin is, where I was digging it the other day, that's most certainly the poorest. Then here are where the potatoes have been, so the 2 tunnels are going to come down here next year, so they'll occupy where the potatoes have been, and obviously that's good because there's going to be very little weed in here, because the potato bin in which you're obviously going to clean the ground. So all the brassicas are going to go in there. So what I'll probably do with this ground, because brassicas like the ground to be reasonably hard, I'll probably rotivate this reasonably earlier on in the year, and then sort of walk it down so the ground's nice and firm for the brassicas. And then obviously this top quarter here will be where the potatoes are, like they were last year. So here, this part here where the onions were and where the 2 tunnels are, is where the potatoes will be next year. So I know this video has been a slightly different format than what it is normally. You haven't had the usual tour, but what I wanted to do is, at this time of the year, is when you need to start planning for next year. And as I say, I'm not one to write it down on a piece of paper. I've been doing this for sort of long enough to realise where things need to kind of be. But the important thing is knowing what the ground is like and what you can and can't grow there. And if you've just first started to have an allotment, or you've changed allotment, a lot of it is kind of sort of experimenting with putting stuff here and there to to see how it grows, and then obviously in the years to come you'll have a better idea. One bit of advice I can give you is, if you don't know how your ground is, I always grow things in blocks. So I'll grow a big block of potatoes, then I'll grow a big block of onions, etc. And I'll do that for ease of watering and sort of keeping everything together nice and tidy. What you can do, there's nothing stopping you putting a couple of rows of potatoes, then some onions, some greens, and then another couple of rows of potatoes, etc., and work your way down like that. There's no reason why you can't do that at all, just to see how the ground goes and what grows well where. If you're not quite sure of how your ground is. But because I know what it's like, I can grow things in blocks, and obviously you can progress to that as you become more familiar with how your allotment behaves, etc. So the important thing is to plan now, so that you can start to prepare the ground for next year. Obviously where the potatoes are going to go, you need to put lots of sort of chicken manure and lots of sort of nutrients in the soil, so your potatoes have got the best chance for next year. And you need to kind of start to do that this side of the winter. It's an ideal time now to prepare for next year. In a month or so's time, in kind of 6 weeks' time, the weather's going to be sort of wet, damp, cold, and it's not going to be particularly nice to be up the allotment to sort of do the digging and stuff. So now, whilst the ground's still reasonably dry and easy to dig, and the weather's nice enough, and we've got some light to work with during the sort of the weekend and during the nights of the week, it's an idea now to prepare and for next year, and it will pay dividends. I've done both. When I've had the time, I've sort of winter dug, which is now, and sort of prepared it, and then next year when I've come to put the crops in, it's going to be so much easier, because you can just quickly rotivate the ground, or quickly sort of fork it over again and put your crops straight in. Whereas if you leave it now and sort of and not bother and just leave it to overwinter, next year it's going to be a lot more sort of hard work to get it dug and get all the weeds out and prepare it, and you'll start to sort of sort of run out of time to get your crops, and so your crops are going to be late, and you're going to be fighting an uphill battle trying to get the ground ready to put your crops in. So what I strongly suggest is, if you have got the time to do it now,
get the ground dug as best you can. You haven't got to be, you know, that particular about it. Even if you just break the ground and just dig it over. Don't worry if there's big clumps, like I was explaining the other day. The frost will do that for you. You know, the frost will break all that up for you over the winter. So all you've got to do is literally just turn the soil. Then next year you'll have a really easy job just to quickly prepare and put your crops in. So now's the time to do that. You know, sort of planning ahead. So enough already. I hope this has been of some interest to you and some use. I'm just trying to give you the best advice for preparing for next year. So please do give me any comments that you've got sort of down below this video, and I will respond to any questions that you might have. And thank you for everybody that's subscribed already to the channel. I do appreciate your support. Anybody else who would like to subscribe, please do so. That would be great. And I hope this has been of some interest to you. Please do join me on the next episode, which will be October tour part 1, which will be coming out in the next week or so. So there's still plenty to do. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. All the best. Thank you. Bye bye.